Oh,
But now we go up, when we visit in the summer, we stay around Sebago Lake area, so the southern part. Yeah.
okay.
Where were you?
We started in Kennebunkport, which I've been to now. I don't need to go back. And ended up at Seal Harbor on
Okay.
Mount Desert
Nice.
Island. But the place we liked best was Rockport, which is near Camden.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we stayed at a bunch of different places, and next time we know.
Yeah. Very nice. Just avoid it in the winter.
Everybody there said winters aren't quite so bad if you're close to the ocean, because the ocean kind of moderates it a little bit.
Yeah. It's still really cold.
Yeah. I grew up in upstate New York, so I'm kind of used to that.
Gotcha. Yeah. Cool.
Morning,
Hi,
bro.
Lincoln. Can you check to see if Allison Davies might be, she might have used the public link. So can you check to see if she's there?
No, only Lauren Albanese is in the attendees right now.
Okay, thanks.
Hey, this is Ben. I'm not going to be on video today. I'm in the car.
All right, well, good morning, everyone. I see Allison's here. And,
Jason, it's kind of hard to hear you.
is that any better?
No.
Can other people hear him?
No.
No.
Okay, 1 second.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning, Scott.
Morning.
Okay.
Is that any better? Can you hear me now?
Not really.
Okay, how about now?
Good.
Yes.
Okay, I guess there's something wrong with my microphone on my computer. All right, well, it looks like everybody's here, so we'll go ahead and get started. We'll call this meeting to order. And the first item on the agenda is going to be the approval of the minutes from December, and then after that, we'll welcome our new members. So if there's a motion to approve the December minutes, we'd accept that motion.
So move.
Scott, is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor of approving the minutes from December, say aye.
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 Any opposed?
I'm going to abstain, Jason.
Yes. It's your first action. And with that, thank you. We will welcome our new members to the meeting. Councillor Pinkston is the new representative on the Retirement Commission. And I understand that you'll just be here for a short time because you're off to a council retreat after this. But we appreciate you coming for a few minutes, and welcome.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me, and I appreciate all the good work that all of you do. And I'm looking forward to learning more about this. It's an important topic or set of topics.
Great, thank you. All right. Well, for the next item, we have something new that we wanted to bring to the commission's attention, and Allison Davies from the City Attorney's Office is here to discuss the next item on the agenda, which is oversight of the defined contribution plan. And as you all know, the city has two retirement plans. One is a defined benefit plan, which about 75% of our employees are in. That's the traditional pension plan. And then the other plan is a defined contribution plan, which the remainder of our employees are in. And that is a plan where the employees receive a set contribution from the city each pay period, and then they are able to invest those contributions themselves in an individually managed account. But the city still has oversight of the plan and the investment options that are available and that sort of thing. And we were looking at making a possible change to that plan, and in discussing it with the city attorney's office, realized that perhaps there should be some more formal oversight of that plan by this commission. And so we wanted to kind of talk through that and what that might look like. And so to do that, we brought Allison here from the attorney's office. So I will turn it over to Allison at this point.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me today at the commission. The initial request that was presented to me in the city attorney's office was a request about whether you could look into changing the contribution rate as that relates to years of service. And so we were looking through the plan documents and the city code, and obviously the state code. I also looked through the IRS regulations. I believe that I hope Lisa was able to forward a memo to you all.
What I did is Jason's going to share his screen because of
Okay.
Freedom of Information Act, like I have to post everything we're going to talk, like we're going to.
I see. Okay.
So Jason, do you want to share that?
Yeah,
Well,
let me try to, yeah, I'll try.
And I'll continue to friend over you while you're doing that. So essentially, when I started to look at the city code, it became clear that that the Retirement Commission, and I think the language has a duty to administer the both the pension and the defined contribution plan. And it had been in the back of my head for a long time. I understand that at some point there had been a subcommittee that sort of addressed concerns of the defined contribution plan. I think that was a while ago. I think that at some point ceased to be in operations. So then I went and added this to the memo, but I looked to see what, under the term duty, what the fiduciary responsibilities might be. And it's the standard of care fiduciary responsibility of essentially a reasonable person would do. So I wanted to raise the issue, in addition to whatever decisions you decide to make on the policy side about the contribution rate based on years of service, wanted to raise the issue for the commission that I'm not sure that the prudent person standard would be met if you're never really setting an agenda item or never reviewing in some meaningful way a a pension plan that is 25% of your employees are in. So, so that was the gist of the initial question about the Retirement Commission's duty. I think that's why you're on the agenda today. With respect to the question that was submitted to me about a change in contribution rate, that is in the memo. You certainly could do that, and you certainly doesn't appear to be any bars at the federal level, the IRS regulations, to prevent you from linking it to years of service. And in fact, when you look at the state code provisions, the requirement that a locality have a pension plan of some sort talks about a pension plan for credible service or years of service. So it does seem to make sense that you might look at how your defined contribution plan would change with years of service. Jason has shared a screen. I think that's just a quote from the duty is to administer supplemental retirement or pension plan. Those are of the city in accordance with the provisions of Chapter 19, Article 3 and 4. I'm happy to answer questions or participate in the discussion as the commissioners see fit.
Allison, I'd like to just ask for a quick 101 explanation of the fund and how it works. What I understand is that in this defined contribution plan, a percentage of salary is, for lack of a better term, gifted to the employee, and they're responsible for management of its growth and care, right?
They are responsible for the allocation of their own funds to the different plans. I think what was somewhat concerning to me is that there isn't any sort of, that I'm aware of, and I might, based on my understanding from talking to staff, any sort of regular review of which funds are available for investment or the plan, or how the city is selecting the outside administrator that's handling that, much like what you do in the, I mean, you actually are contracting with someone on the pension side to manage your funds. When you're doing a defined contribution plan, there's still a limit of the types of funds available and where those funds can be allocated or left to the individual employee as opposed to the Retirement Commission. But there still would appear to be some level of duty on the Retirement Commission's behalf to sort of monitor overall the funds that are being made available to employees for their own allocation.
I'd like to just jump in really quickly for a little more background. Currently, the administration has been housed in HR. We did have a committee at one point reviewing everything. We do contract with an outside firm that monitors the investments and helps us monitor the performance of the investments. And if we have to make any changes, we do have an outside investment manager similar to the pension plan. So there has been oversight on that side. And as far as procurement and choosing the administrator, we've used them as well to help us with any RFPs and things. So there has been oversight. However, I think the issue is we probably need to get more people from the commission involved in that process.
Because of how the city code is written and the expectation that the Retirement Commission is the one that makes the decisions and about changes or amendments to the defined contribution plan. My point to Sarah specifically was that if the Retirement Commission has not been reviewing or administering this plan in any way over the course of several years, how are they in a position to make decisions about whether it needs to be adjusted or changed?
Is it is it fair to assume that anybody who works at the city knows that this thing exists?
Oh, I would, yes, I think that it's fair to assume that that is true. I mean, here's the reality.
Because I
this is-
didn't know it existed.
Well, and that would, as a retirement commissioner, that would speak to perhaps the issue that we're addressing here.
Employees
So
are,
I think-
employees are offered the choice when they come to work for the city, which program they want to be in.
You can be in one or the other, but not both?
You can
That's
be in one or the
correct.
other.
And what you pick when you start is what you are stuck with.
And there is a percentage of city contribution. Can you tell us what that is?
8%.
Of salary.
So the city contributes to this Mission Square plan, and the employees contribute also. And the same is true for the other one that we already know about, right?
Yeah, so really yes, there are two different plans. The issue is the degree of autonomy that the employee has over the plan.
So in the Mission Square, the employees pick where the money goes, and in the other one, they don't.
Yes, if we're referring to the defined contribution plan, yes. The Mission Square defined contribution plan.
And the vesting is different as well.
Can we get an explanation on vesting too?
I mean, I might want to defer to Sarah on this. I'm not sure that I could give you the most accurate definition. The vesting is different to the extent that it's cash and carry when the employee leaves, as opposed to a pension where you're going to come back at 65. But I don't think that under our plan documents, it contemplates that the employee has access to that funding per se. When they leave, they just take that account to roll over into whatever other retirement plan they have.
Are they able to leave it where it is?
Yes.
Yes.
I can speak to a minute about the vesting. So in the pension plan, employee has to have 5 years of credible service to be vested in the plan. And in the 401A plan, which is what we're talking about, there's a 3-year graded vesting schedule. So if a person leaves after 1 year, they're 33% vested. After 2 years, they're 67% vested. And then after the 3rd year, they're 100% vested.
So if an employee chooses the 401A, you said,
Yes.
plan, and puts their money into it and leaves after a year, they don't get back what they put into it?
Okay, so the 401A plan is strictly employer funded. So the city puts in 8% and the employee is not required to put in anything. However, we do have a lot of employees who want to save. So we have another defined contribution plan, and it's also managed by Mission Square, and it's called the 457B plan. And so employees can defer money from their pay and put it into an account, a 457B account, and they also control those investments.
Is it the same as this one?
The same investment options.
Well, yeah, the same investment options.
But they have, so if they're in the 401A and the 457B, they have 2 different accounts.
But the 457 is exclusively their own money. So they would take that money. It's
Right.
the 401A that they would not get if they didn't, or at least would only get a percentage of if they left before 3 years.
Correct.
And
So
who oversees this? Sarah, who oversees this?
Right, so administratively, it's falling under HR, and in the past, and currently we meet quarterly with an outside investment advisor, and budget, treasurer, and HR we've been involved most recently. So administration of the plan falls in human resources currently.
I guess I would just
Has.
jump in, and I don't want there to be the idea that there's no oversight over this plan, because there is a staff group that has been meeting continually for oversight. It's just that the city code says the retirement commission should be doing that. And so we want to bring that oversight under the retirement commission since it's a city retirement plan.
That's really the point, is that that the code would contemplate some level of supervision. It doesn't, I mean, honestly, you could designate a subcommittee with a couple of retirement commission members on it. But I do think that there needs to be some, to some extent, to a limited extent at least, a review on a regular basis by the actual retirement commission.
So Jason, this has been, apologies, I'm not on video. I don't think you're going to hear a lot of pushback if you, as the treasurer and HR and city, city attorneys say that the council or that the commission needs to be reviewing that. I don't think you're going to hear a lot of pushback on it. I think it sounds like a question of educating the commission about what we're supposed to be overseeing. And so I think the plan that we ought to discuss, and maybe it's something you have in your head, is just what is the plan for giving the commission the education that it needs to be able to do that effectively. And I don't think we want to put you guys through the ringer on this call, but I do think it sounds like you're hearing a lot of a need for education at this point.
Yeah, I think in my mind, it's to understand exactly what the standard of fiduciary care is for this plan versus potentially the defined benefit, or if there is a difference between the two. It seems to me in my head there's a difference, but again, those are details or education to be worked out later.
Yeah, and Chris, I agree with you. And then, specifically, I do think I'd like to know more about the investment options, the investment managers, all those kind of things. So I think there's just, the point I'm making is there's a significant lift, I think, that needs to happen in terms of bringing us up to speed. But I personally don't have any objection to bringing it under the commission's purview, especially given that it sounds like it should have been our job all along.
Is it reasonable to assume that maybe Ben and myself are the ones who don't know much about this, and that the rest of you do?
Speaking for myself, I know of the defined contribution plan, but I'm not, I don't think I've ever had a briefing of details as long as I've been on the commission, which is 6+ years.
I would say I know as an employee, I know what it is, but as somebody who has a fiduciary standard of care, I'm not sure what that is.
As a retiree, I have no idea.
Yeah, you've
I
got
would
the
agree
good
with
stuff,
both.
man. You've got the defined benefit.
Yeah. I would agree with both Chris and Scott. As an employee, I generally know what it is. It's something where your first day they hand you a piece of paper and they're like, sign this, and that's what you do. As someone who has a fiduciary duty, I would like to know a little bit more about the nuts and bolts, because employees may pick their plan based on very different reasoning than someone who's a fiduciary needs to know. I will fully admit that is most likely why I picked whichever plan I did, is more of my particular needs as an employee versus an in-depth analysis of the nuts and bolts.
Yeah, that sounds about right for me as well. Being an employee, first day, like you say, how do you want your money invested, or what do you want to do with it? The how, as far as the commission, I guess, for the last couple of years, we haven't talked about it. So if it seems, I won't say simple or obvious, that if we're responsible for the retirement funding or process, and that if the city's contributing that 8%, it seemed like it would fall under our responsibility or that fiduciary responsibility. So,
Well, and I do think that, it's really clear that you're the ones that make decisions about changes in conjunction with the city manager. So if there was a request to change that plan in some way, it would be important for the retirement commission to have enough knowledge to make an informed decision.
What does the city manager do with respect to this? Is there a city manager?
I think there's a city manager starting soon, right, Ashley?
So we have a contracted interim city manager that will be providing assistance through the Robert Bob Group for at least 6 months while council engages in their search for a permanent. However, think of it more of the city manager's office. So that's why I sit to represent the city manager's office. If changes needed to be made or were desired to be made, the city manager would sign off on those changes. So that's why the city manager's office is involved, because they oversee, of course, all of the day-to-day operations of the organization, which would include any significant changes to employees' total rewards benefits packages. So that is more of where it is, but that's, as deputy, that's my job, is to make sure I'm here, present, and providing that information to whomever is sitting in the city manager's seat, whether it's Mr. Rogers, who is on contract with a consulting group, or whether it's the permanent individual once they are selected and vetted.
And the actual plan administration is signed by the city manager. So when you adopt or amend the defined contribution plan, all of these terms really matter in terms of keeping the names clear. But the defined contribution plan, when you adopt that, that's something that is signed and authorized by the city manager. And so that's why I say the retirement commission, in conjunction with the city manager, would be the one that made amendments to, in this particular case, we're talking about the defined contribution plan. So if the retirement commission is unaware of the plan or the details of the plan, that makes it hard for them to provide that advice and direction for the city manager.
Thanks, that helps.
So I think what we'd like to do, this was just sort of the introduction of this topic. At the February meeting, we've invited the plan consultant who works with the defined contribution plan to come to this meeting and give more of an oversight of the plan and how it works, and the fiduciary duty that would be involved from the commission to provide that oversight of the plan. And they would be better equipped to answer a lot of your questions that you have. Specific thing comes up about how the fund lineup is made, or the plan administration, how the record keeping works, that sort of thing. They would be able to answer those questions as well. And hopefully, with more in-depth meeting in February, we can answer your questions and give you a greater level of comfort of what you're getting involved with, if that sounds okay.
Jason, have you been involved with this Mission Square thing? I mean, closely involved?
Yes.
Well, that makes me feel better.
Yeah, that's good news.
Having the city manager doesn't make me feel better.
Well, I mean, I think for the last few years, Sarah and Lisa, since she's been here, and Chrissy Hamill from the budget office have been involved in a staff subcommittee. It's just recently we realized that really should be under the retirement commission as well. And not to say that the defined contribution plan was an afterthought, but it is a newer plan. Hasn't been around as long as the defined benefit plan. And this commission has only ever had employee reps that were in the defined benefit plan. So I think we're just trying to broaden that oversight if we can.
And for what
am I the only person on here who is not in the pension plan as an employee?
I'm not in the pension plan.
Okay.
We team members are not.
But you're right. I mean, there has not been historically people on the retirement commission that have a vested interest in sort of worrying about or being concerned about the issues that are presented in the defined contribution plan.
And for what it's worth, for folks who aren't familiar with Mission Square, they used to be known as ICMA Retirement something, I forget what it's called, but they are, I think it's safe to say, the largest provider of this service for local governments across the country. They were created just for local governments, for their employees, and for some of the sort of unique situations and some of the unique tax treatments of these type of funds. And so they've been around for decades. I've been a member for 25 years now in various capacities. And so if there's any concerns about who Mission Square is and what they are, they have a very long track record of providing service to local governments across the country.
And additionally, the city's had a relationship with them since I've been an employee, which is nearly 20 years.
Yeah, I will add that we were ICMA's first client. So that's how far back our relationship goes. We are Plan 1.
Client 00001.
Yes. So it's a very long relationship.
Hey,
That's
Jason,
good
before
news,
we get
too.
off this topic, can I ask a couple quick questions?
Sure.
So first, so the contribution, the 8% that the city gives toward the defined contribution plan, can that only go toward Mission Square, or is there options that an employee can invest through their bank or whatever?
No, there's just one option.
Oh, within that one option, there are dozens of choices, correct?
Yeah, there are multiple funds within that one option.
And names, I think T Rowe's in there. I think Vanguard's in there. There are a variety of investment strategies to meet your individual needs.
Yeah, as I see it, it operates, Joe, very much like a 401k in the private sector.
Right. So I guess my question was to, if they had choices, they wouldn't want a supervisor. But if they only go through Mission Square, then yeah, I can see the concern there.
Well,
the second, go ahead, please.
Oh no, I was just going to say, and it's really you're not going to be doing anything more than making sure that you're reviewing Mission Square's performance with respect to the defined contribution plan on a regular basis. I mean, employees are still going to be making individual choices within that plan, or whatever main administrator, the retirement commission checked. It's more the issue that the code talks about the retirement commission having a duty to administer this. And so it's sort of, I don't even think it's fair to the staff, quite frankly, that they're the ones that are sort of administering it without retirement commission oversight, since that's what the city code contemplates.
No, I agree. If it's the only choice offered, and that is the plan that the city has chosen that is the only choice, then yes, there should be some supervision. But what I was alluding to is the reason they sometimes pick contribution plans because they think they can manage their money better than maybe the city, and they want to have full control over that. So, but if it's the only choice that the city offers, and it's seems to me to be a good choice, but I guess the second question is, how did this start with the question of how much you pay based on years of service? What is that about? How did that start?
Well, I can start by saying that the question is that, right now there have been no amendments, changes, or evaluation of the defined contribution plan since its inception. And it's the directive from the state code is that this is a service-based plan. And so, I mean, in the introductory memo, I talk about sort of some policy implications of having an underutilized defined contribution plan. But the bottom line is that looking at a change in contribution rate for people who reach a certain level of years of service was a question that came up as maybe a good way to create two incentives. The first incentive being an incentive to have the plan be more attractive to people, and an incentive to provide people with an interest in staying with the city if the city's invested a lot of time in their training and development.
Right.
So that's sort of
basically what we're saying. At some point, if based on the employee's longevity that the city may increase the contribution rate to Mission Square for the
Yeah,
defined
at a set rate for a certain percent, certain years of service.
And would that be also for the defined benefits? Would we increase that rate? Or
Well, so
would
the issue with
we?
the issue with the
Go ahead.
defined benefit program is that you are, I mean, the rate on the defined benefit program is so much higher than the defined contribution rate. So that rate is determined by your outside actuarial services that tells the city how much they're going to need to contribute so that they can meet their obligations. So that rate is a floating rate that that is designed to make sure that the pension is fully funded. It's
Okay,
not a
thank
set
you.
rate.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank
and
you very much for
yeah,
those
that-
answers.
Yeah, that's a good question. There are several components of the defined benefit plan that are tied to years of service, as far as getting a COLA, having access to the healthcare benefit, and that sort of thing. So there are similarities in that sense that it makes sense that the benefit would possibly increase with longevity, like it does if you're in the defined benefit plan.
And I think I do think that when I look back at the state code and their reference to a service retirement, that's what they were contemplating when they wrote the law that required municipalities to offer retirement plans.
No, thank you both. And I agree with the comment earlier. There needs to be a huge education piece to this. But no, that kind of it answered my concerns there. I appreciate it. Thank you.
So somewhere in there, I think I heard somebody say that the makeup of Mission Square's roster of funds has not changed since day one. Is that true?
No, the plan hasn't changed. The roster of funds probably has changed as Mission Square has offered different investment options like T. Rowe Price versus, I don't know. I don't know that I know them off the top of my head.
Well,
There's an attachment
example.
there's an attachment to the email that Lisa sent out titled December 2021 RC, or I'm sorry, which one is it? Is it the fund performance one? Yeah.
Fund performance.
Yeah.
And you can look through it and you can see the roster of specific options they offer and the various investment strategies. It gives you some idea of their rate of returns, inception, expense ratios, all of that stuff. So
I keep looking over to the side, Chris, because I'm looking at a printout of exactly what you just said.
Okay.
So
And I
we
would
got
say there
two-
have been changes even since I've been here. We've added options since I've worked here. So it definitely has not been the same since inception.
The same
that-
fund option, but then in terms of the rules of the plan or the structure of the plan, that hasn't been evaluated since its inception. Just the
And I-
funds within it.
I will add that when we hired the outside consultant to help us look at these investments, they did come to the Retirement Commission and we had a education piece, but that was that was probably 10 years ago. So anyway, we have reviewed the fund lineup, and like Lisa said, when the performance doesn't match, there have been changes made. But the structure of the plan has not changed.
Quick question about the purpose of creating this fund, if anybody has any historical knowledge. In the city's eyes, was it created as an attempt to maybe wean new employees off of the defined benefit plan and onto defined contribution? Is there any goals for the amount of employees that the city thinks should be in each plan? And was there ever maybe a long-term goal to do away with the defined benefit with something like this?
My understanding is it was put in 1999 in actual response to those people who didn't plan to come to the city and retire with 30 years. We had a lot of trailing spouses at UVA, for instance. And those employees wanted an option to save that didn't mean a benefit at 65. So my understanding is it was put in 1999 to meet that need of some employees. But it was
Okay,
never
thanks.
in an attempt to replace the pension.
Thank you.
But Scott, across the country, both governments and private companies have been replacing defined benefit plans with defined contribution plans just because, I mean, put simply, it's real expensive to do defined benefit for the entity. And this is a way of shifting some of that cost onto the employee. So this is part of a national trend away from defined benefit and pensions towards defined contributions.
Industry-wide, but perhaps not city-specific.
Yeah, and not just local governments or state governments, but private entities, private companies as well. I mean, everybody's heard the story of like retiring from GE with your pension, and you can't do that anymore because it's real expensive for GE to offer you that. So it's just, we're in line with national trends by offering this and moving employees towards it.
Yeah, I will say from family experience that an 8% contribution is a really good contribution these days.
Yeah, I'm ready to come work for the city at this point, guys. 8%, let's do it. Yeah. I'm in.
Got some openings.
Yeah,
we certainly have openings. So
I've read about them in the newspaper, which is part of the problem, right?
Yeah. So I think that it is true that it wasn't, there's never been a plan in the city to get rid of the pension plan. It does create flexibility in the budget if you have an incentive to get some people into the defined contribution plan, which is my point from the memo, because it's a set budgeting amount as opposed to a percentage that's determined based on market performance.
And Lisa and Sarah, am I correct in my understanding that, while this is an option and we hear about sort of the new generation of employees, typically working somewhere for 5 years and then moving on, but our experience is actually more and more new employees are continuing to select the defined benefit, the traditional pension program than this one. Is that correct?
I would say it's about half and half still.
Okay.
We haven't had a real big shift of people switching to the defined contribution, especially public safety. They pretty much always choose the pension. I would say some of our departments, we see more going into the DC plan, but it's been never, the shocking number. It's been pretty even and consistent over the years.
Because we are unique. That is one of the, from a compensation standpoint, in terms of total compensation, that is something that makes us different than the private sector, is that we continue to offer a pension program.
Yeah.
Sarah, if there are 100 employees at the city, how many are in the defined contribution and how many are in the defined benefit?
Lisa, correct me if I'm off, but I think we have about 230 in the defined contribution, roughly, and the remainder.
For this meeting, I had run a report for Allison, and I want to say that of all of our employees, about 66% are in the defined benefit plan, and about 33% are in the defined contribution plan, approximately. Does that sound right, Allison?
That's what I mean, that's when you ran the report, I believe that was what the result was.
So the defined benefit plan, the pension plan, has many more participants in it. But if you're talking about 100 people, then I would say 66 are in the defined benefit and 34 are in the defined contribution.
Right.
To answer your question, David.
So if we've covered this for now, is it safe to say that we'll get together in February, Jason, with a presentation from the team who manages the defined contribution plan?
Yeah, I think that's the plan. That will be the main item on the agenda. So I hope you're ready.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Allison. We appreciate
Sure.
it.
I was going to leave the meeting unless I'm needed for anything else.
Thank you.
All right, y'all have a good day.
Thanks. Okay. All right. Hopefully everyone can still hear me. The next item on the agenda is a discussion of the cost of living adjustment for the FY23 budget. This is one of those things that sometimes happens by default, but we wanted to make sure that we were able to get some input from the commission. And basically, when the budget is passed every year, City Council approves a cost of living adjustment for retirees. Traditionally, retirees have received half of whatever general employees received. And so we just wanted to bring that up and get some input from the commission regarding that. We don't know exactly what will be recommended in the budget yet, but we do know what has been happening in the market and what has been happening as far as cost of living adjustments for Social Security and those types of benefits, as well as the impacts of inflation and what that might be having on our retirees' budgets. And so what we would like to recommend, and I guess to take a small step back, the cost of living adjustment is something that is partially funded through the contribution rate. One of the changes that we made a few years ago was to what we call pre-fund a cost of living adjustment. So 1% is kind of automatically assumed that it will be granted. Any cost of living adjustment that exceeds 1% requires additional funding. And that additional funding is about $1.4 million a year for the city. So it's quite expensive to provide a cost of living adjustment that exceeds the 1% that is already funded in the contribution rate. But in speaking with the budget office, my understanding is that they have built in a 2% cost of living adjustment for retirees. And so I just wanted to bring that to the commission and see if the commission wanted to provide any input that could be considered by the city manager and budget office as they are developing their budget. And ultimately that would go to city council. But just wanted to see what your thoughts were around that.
Jason, I was jotting something down on a piece of paper. Did you say there's a percentage planned? And what is that?
Yeah, so the amount that is kind of already included in the contribution rate is 1%. The budget office is working with the assumption that retirees be granted a 2% cost of living increase, which would increase the contribution rate. So it would be the assumed rate that the actuary gave us in October, plus an additional amount to cover an additional 1% cost of living increase for a total of 2%.
Okay.
Has it typically been 1%? Is that the norm?
Well, I don't know that there is a norm. Typically over the last 5 years or so, when employees have gotten a cost of living increase, it's been 2%. And so retirees have gotten half. That's kind of been traditionally how the city has approached this issue. So if there's a norm, I would say that has kind of been the norm, but that's not always been the case in the past. Sometimes it's been more or less than that.
Yeah, it's more of a placeholder for budgeting purposes. And then once council actually determines a COLA, if there is one, then there may be an adjustment that needs to be made that we do another way. But the 1% is really just a budget placeholder as it gets put together.
And this will be accounted for in the next year's salary. That's where we'll know what the COLA is.
Yeah, and I think I'm comfortable saying that retirees, there's an assumption that the traditional half of the salary increase that employees get is what retirees would get. Not just, 1% is interesting, but hardly useful for most people. And traditionally, it's been understood that at least the attempt would be half of the employees increases. So I would encourage that.
But in
Jason, is
reading-
there a reason to vary from that half? I know you said it's been done a lot of different ways in the past, but it sounds like the most recent way it's been done is that half of current employees. Is there a good reason to deviate from that in this case?
Well, I mean, one thing is we don't know what might be proposed yet for general employees. But we would like for the commission to be able to provide input kind of separate from that. I think they are separate issues. They have different budgetary impacts. And frankly, a lot of it is cost, it's expensive to grant a COLA.
Not just to the city, they take the front cost, but then there's legacy costs going down, right?
Right. I mean, anything that exceeds 1%, if it were not funded immediately, would add to the unfunded liability of the plan because no contributions were made to fund a COLA in excess of 1%.
And when that's occurred in the last few years, we've been fortunate in that we've had year-end surpluses, which we've been able to make up that difference pretty quickly thereafter, maybe a year after it actually happened. And so we're not, we're being very diligent about avoiding those exact legacy costs, just passing it along, but not funding it. It's been a very, very deliberate thought and action.
Jason, can I clarify? Just ask a clarifying question here. What are you bringing this up to the commission's attention? Or are you asking for the commission to do something here?
So ultimately, city council is responsible for setting the retiree COLA as part of the budget approval. But I think it's important that the commission have input and provide a recommendation on what that cost of living increase ought to be. And then ultimately it would be up to city council. If they want to make it higher or lower, they can. But you all are the ones that are most familiar with the plan. And so it makes sense for us as a group to kind of make a recommendation through the city manager's office of what we think that cost of living increase ought to be. So yes, I guess
to do that from the perspective of the retirement plan, not necessarily the perspective of the actual beneficiaries.
Well, I think there's several different interests involved. One would be a purely budgetary interest, which is not necessarily the commission's responsibility. But I think our interest is to represent the beneficiaries of the plan. And so there's a little bit of a conflict there, but I think we ought to be aware of the financial impacts as well. But I think primarily we would be looking at, one, we want to protect the funded status and the liabilities of the plan and make a recommendation that is financially responsible, but also to represent the plan beneficiaries and make sure that we're meeting our obligation to them and make sure that they have a secure retirement. So we're trying to balance all of those things in our recommendation.
Hey, Jason, is this something we can ask Sage View to put together some scenarios for us to look at?
We did. And so, the 1% that's already in the plan. Basically, if a 1% cost of living increase was granted in July, it would not impact the funded status at all because they're sort of already assuming we're going to do that. If there was a year where a cost of living was not granted, it would have a positive impact on the funded status. If there was a year where a cost of living was granted in that exceeded 1%, it would have a negative impact on the funded status. And we did ask them in October, how much that impact is, and it's $1.4 million per 1%. So that's the additional funding that would be required from the city to grant a 2% COLA is they would need to come up with another $1.4 million to do so. But that is the number that the budget office is currently working with. Hopefully that answers your question.
So
Yes.
if there are, as Allison said a few minutes ago, a lot of open positions for Ben to step into. If the world is at 6% and the city is at 1%, how do you go about filling those positions?
Well, this is just for retirees, for people who are already retired.
I see.
Yeah.
Have we ever talked about this before? Because I don't remember.
Well, no, I don't. I mean, it's kind of been an afterthought. It's been part of the budget process. And so another one of those things we would like to get input from the commission before the budget is passed, you know?
And there were a lot of years of 2% increases. So it wasn't a matter of discussion because the 1% was built in pretty much.
Yeah, there were a lot of years of 2% increases in COLAs when inflation was 0. But now we're having a conference. So that was a benefit. That was a benefit to employees and retirees. But it does sound like we're now just because there is some inflation talking about an enhanced COLA of a discrepancy where the past, call it decade, has been to the benefit of the employee, the budget or the retirement plan necessarily.
And I hate to ask you to repeat that, but about half of it got lost.
Sorry, my point is the past decade when we haven't had any inflation, people have still been getting a 2% COLA and then 1% for retirees. So that's been to the benefit of the retiree and employee. If that makes sense.
Yeah, thanks. So to be clear again, the agenda asks for a recommendation. Are we positioned and ready to give a recommendation at this point? I don't know that we are.
I would say I'm not, Scott.
Yeah.
I'm shaking my head no.
I think it's really, and Jason, you can certainly correct me if I'm wrong. I think there are actually two questions. One is there an actual percentage? And then two is the practice of granting at least half of whatever COLA is ultimately adopted in the budget. Jason,
Yeah, I mean,
would you
I think
that?
I think by default, that the budget is currently being built with a 2% cost of living increase for retirees. If the commission does not make any recommendation at this meeting or the next meeting, that's most likely what's going to happen. I think the thought to bringing it to the commission was, if you have any strong opinions on whether it should be higher or lower than that, this would be an opportunity to provide that input to the city manager's office. But if not, they will just proceed and no action is required by the commission. We just wanted to bring it to your attention that it is an item that we could provide some thoughts on if we wanted to, but it's not required, if that makes sense.
Right. And so 1% is included in the recipe to start with, and then the extra 1.4 is available through the budget office in the city for 2%.
Yes.
But Jason, just so I'm understanding this, you're saying that the extra 1% that's currently being baked in, the plan is to fund it. And so if a 2% COLA was offered to retirees, it would not have an impact currently on the funded status.
That's right, because we've calculated the additional cost and it's being included in the city's contribution rate.
Got it.
Well, and
So this just
and-
falls
and
on
this-
us as taxpayers, not as commission members.
That's why you're a citizen rep.
Those of us who are both.
Well, if that's what they're considering and the 1.4 is there and it has no impact, then I don't see any reason that the commission couldn't recommend, 2% or, whatever additional that they could fund so that it had no impact on the fund. But
Yeah.
I'd sort of like to see the commission recommend the 2%. Since that protects the fund and the retirees. But I
It's
know that's-
still probably a third of what inflation was. I mean, is 3% even possible without messing up our funding status?
My understanding from the budget office is coming up with an additional $1.4 million would be a really heavy lift. On top of 1.4 already, it would be very difficult.
What if we were to pay out of the funds and absorb the increased or decreased funding status?
I think that runs counter to everything we're trying to do right now to get up to 80%.
I hear you. I hear you.
Well,
This is a very unusual year, though, we hope.
as the other person who doesn't work at the city and is also a taxpayer, this is kind of a hard question because, if you ask me to make a decision like right now, I think 2% is out of step with the world. And if more than 2%, which is what I think it should be, is not possible, then, what do you want us to do?
Well, if it should be more than 2 and 2 is possible, I think we should recommend at least the 2%.
Yeah, that would be one option, is to recommend it at least 2% that's built in, and then remember this conversation for next year. We don't know what a cost of living increase would be next year. And, if this commission knows, hey, last year we really wanted to give more than 2% and we couldn't, we could take that into consideration when this conversation comes up a year from now.
When hopefully we're back to where we've been over the last decade, back to inflation rate of 2% or less.
Just a quick question. What is the COLA going to be? What's being built into the budget this year? Is it 3%, 4%?
I have not seen anything yet regarding a regular COLA for employees.
Still being evaluated during the budget making.
So just my 2 cents, I believe it should be at least half of whatever the COLA is should be given to retirees, but that's just my opinion. At least half of whatever is being built into the budget for a COLA for regular employees should be given to retirees, but anything more would be great for the retirees also. So.
Jason, is this a decision that we can make in February?
I
think if the council or those in charge are asking for our recommendation, if that's the case, which it sounds like it is, correct me if I'm wrong, Jason, but we probably ought to put something out there, and putting out what Al alluded to as a minimum of 2% is a safe thing to do right now, because we have that covered. And I think we could
Which is what it sounds like
subsequent
the city,
meetings.
the budget office is currently doing, right? So it sounds like the default, if we do nothing, is they're proceeding with 2%.
The reality
Right.
is, in terms of the budget calendar, is that we're trying to get it balanced within the next week or so. The budget actually goes to council at the very start of March, so a month from now,
Okay.
to the extent that this commission wants to propose something different than what's being baked in, that would need to be expressed now.
Well, I would suggest a minimum 2% and any additional that could be funded. I know the extra 1.4 might be a heavy lift, but 40 years I've seen them make heavy lifts before.
Yeah. Someone who's articulate want to try to come up with some language on that?
I would
We can act
suggest
on.
I
minimum
second
of
what Al just
2%.
said.
Yeah.
A
Right.
minimum of 2% and a heavy lift for whatever else they can do.
Okay, so
do we-
Al's made a motion for at least a 2% cost of living increase funded in the budget. Chris has seconded that motion. And just to be clear, we're not making that decision. We're making that recommendation for council's consideration.
Agreed. Yeah. I'm okay voting on that.
Okay, all in favor of making that recommendation to city council, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I'm opposed.
Great, thank you. Let me check our agenda. Do we have any new business? Lisa, do we have anything else?
The only thing I just wanted to make sure everybody saw is I wrote up a calendar for 2022. So these things can change, but I just wanted to give everybody an idea of upcoming meeting topics. And also, we're still waiting for having face-to-face meetings. So I'm just going to go on a limb and predict we're going to be doing a Zoom meeting for February and March. But I will let you all know if anything changes.
Thank you for organizing the fiduciary training.
You're very welcome.
That's really important.
Yep.
Okay.
Calendar looks okay to me, Lisa.
Thanks. And like I said, as things come up, I will modify it, but that's what we're starting off with.
Yeah, I think we were hoping to at least put a few things on the calendar to give everyone a sense of what the year might look like. And like Lisa said, that obviously could change as things come up, but that's sort of our tentative roadmap for the year.
So Jason?
Yes.
I'm looking at April. So report from Defined Contribution Plan Investment Subcommittee.
That was, that's under the assumption that some sort of subcommittee is going to be formed in regarding the defined contribution plan that we discussed with Allison. And the idea is that we were thinking that, you know, if that's the case, that they would probably present to the full committee 2 times a year or so. And so we just sort of put something on the calendar tentatively as a placeholder.
But we don't have a subcommittee.
Not yet, no.
Okay.
But
Not
rest
enough.
assured, you're on it.
We have an ad hoc subcommittee currently, but it's not an official subcommittee.
You're being drafted.
Okay. All right, well, that's the last full item for the full commission. There is a closed session item for the investment subcommittee. Of course, anyone who really wants to stay for that can, but you're under no obligation to stay for that. I believe David and Ben and I are going to do that. We're just going to be discussing some of the fund managers and their performance on an individual level, and that's something that we would do in closed session. So if you don't want to participate, we're going to adjourn the regular meeting. We're going to keep the Zoom meeting open. Lisa sent out the conference line if you want to join the conference line for that discussion. So communications is going to leave the Zoom open, but you can exit the Zoom call if you desire and call into the closed session. But let me share my screen so we can make a motion to go into closed session real quick here. The right one.
I think Chris is going to make the motion.
Yeah, I've got it, Jason. If you want me to read it.
Oh, yeah, if you don't mind reading that.
Sure. So a motion for a closed session of the Charlottesville Retirement Commission pursuant to section 2.2-3712 of the Virginia Code. I hereby move that the Charlottesville Retirement Commission, as the duly appointed local retirement system for the city, close this open meeting and convene in closed session for discussions by the commission of information subject to exclusion under section 2.2-3705.7, paragraph 24, specifically discussions concerning information held by the retirement system relating to internal deliberations or decisions by the retirement system of particular investment strategies or the selection or termination of investment managers prior to the execution of such investment strategies or the selection or termination of such managers, where disclosure of such information would have an adverse impact on the financial interests of the retirement system, and trade secrets provided by a private entity to the retirement system would have an adverse impact on the financial interest of the retirement system. This closed session is authorized by Virginia Code section 2.2-3711, section A, paragraph 38. Do I have a motion?
This has been so moved.
Seconded.
Second.
I second it.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Jason, just a quick question before do you need a quorum to come out of closed session and adjourn the meeting? Can we adjourn the meeting and then do the closed session?
I'm not sure.
If you need a quorum when you're done with, I guess, the closed session, if you want to call a couple of members so we have a quorum, that would be fine with.
All right. Yeah, if it looks like we don't have enough to close out the meeting, we'll call somebody.
Good thinking, Joe.
Yeah, thank you.
Phone a friend or a commission member.
All right, thank you all. So you can exit the Zoom meeting, and if you want to join the closed session, you can call the conference line.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, I was annoyed by the whole entire thing. And if LLIS, just say, well, I'm at 3%, or somebody say it if that's what you want, but don't just keep passing over like, we want it to be half of what it is. Ugh. But definitely, when David Hughes said, Jason, are you involved in this? And he said, yes, and he said, well, that makes me feel better, like, oh, because we're just like embezzling and making horrible decisions. I don't even know why.
Hello,
Okay.
welcome back.
Didn't take as long as I thought.
So Jason, do we need a quorum of the commission to adopt this particular certification?
I mean, I think just the members that were present in the closed session could certify it.
Yeah,
If that works for you all.
That makes sense to me, because how would somebody who wasn't in the session be able to certify what was discussed in the session? Right? And so so the members present were myself, David Hughes, Ashley Marshall, Jason Vandiver, and Ben Cullup joined us for most of it. However, he lost service and hasn't rejoined us. So with that, I will, I've got a motion certification of closed meeting by the Charlottesville Retirement Commission. I move that this commission certify by recorded vote that to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from the open meeting requirements of Virginia Freedom of Information Act and identified in the motion convening the closed session were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed session. Do I have a motion?
I so
I
move.
move what you just said.
And do we have a second?
I can second.
Okay. All in favor, vote aye.
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 Noes? Not hearing any. 4-0.
Excellent. All right, well, thank you all. Sorry, that was kind of a long meeting. Ashley, thank you for joining us again.
Yeah, thanks, Ashley.
And I guess with that, we can adjourn the meeting.
All right.
Good.
See y'all
Thanks.
later.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye.